We're good.
Okay, cool. So this is the city auditor endorsement interview. We have Simone ready here. We don't have Brian Setzler here right now, but we're going to proceed anyways. So I think to start, it would be great if you could just give sort of your intro, you know, who you are, why you're running, why you think you're a good fit for this position.
Sure. Good morning. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today and to ask for your endorsement. My name is Simone Reddy. I'm an Oregonian. I was born in Salem and raised in Portland, and I am a graduate of Portland Public Schools. I've also experienced our region's public institutions as an educator and parent and public servant. I am running for city auditor because Portlanders have questions and they deserve answers about how their government is working. I've spent my entire career asking and answering questions of public interest, and it's very well documented that Portlanders are not happy with the way things are working and our current living conditions in the city, specifically with regard to homelessness, public safety, and equity. And the auditor's office is uniquely positioned to make improvements in those areas and also make the government more accountable and accessible to city residents. I think that I'm the best choice for this position because I bring an experience, a deep experience in performance auditing. I also have the right values and a breadth of community support to take on this role. And I believe that these reasons make me ready to hold city accountable from day one.
Can you tell us a little bit about your experience as an auditor?
Sure. So I started my auditing career almost 10 years ago at the Oregon Secretary of State Audits Division. I was hired into the profession by Gary Blackmer, who is one of my supporters. He served as the city, county, and state auditor.
So I'm sorry, what degree did you get? Pardon me, what sort of qualifications do you need to be an auditor?
Well, with government performance auditing, it tends to attract folks with diverse backgrounds in economics or public policy, public administration.
What was your background?
I have a bachelor's degree in urban studies and a master's in public policy.
So it doesn't require an accounting background?
Not performance auditing. Accounting is it's probably necessary for someone who is working as an accountant or performing financial audits of the city. But the core function of the city auditor's office in Portland is performance audits, and that's really looking at how well policies are being implemented.
So walk us through your job history, if you would.
Sure. My job history is beginning with performance auditing 10 years ago at the Secretary of State.
You got hired by Blackmer at the Secretary of State office to be a performance auditor?
Performance auditor.
Okay.
There's a performance audits division and a financial audits division.
And is it fair to say you didn't have much experience before?
No, I'd like to tell you actually about the career I had prior to being an auditor and prior to earning a master's degree. So my experience is exclusively in the public sector. After I graduated from college, I did an independent study in Mexico on the effects of migration affecting women who stay behind. I then served as an AmeriCorps volunteer in St. John's, again doing research about the barriers that young men were facing in accessing teen parent services. And then I started working in schools, helping parents and families prepare for life after high school. That was all prior to my graduate
How long
experience.
did you work in the schools?
I think about 4 years.
At
3 or 4
PPS
years.
or?
I worked actually initially through Oregon Council for Hispanic Advancement, which is no longer. It's now the Latino Network. But it was providing culturally specific services, mentoring services in Portland public high schools and middle schools in North Portland. After that program transitioned, I worked for Alternative Pathways, which is specifically supporting youth who are finishing their high school either through a GED or through a traditional high school diploma. And that program was administered by the Multnomah Education Service District.
So then you get hired by the Secretary of State's office to be a performance auditor, and you do that for how long?
I was there for 2 years, and then I was hired by the Metro Auditor in Portland to conduct performance audits of our region's public programs and services.
And how does that scope of work differ from what you did at the Secretary of State's office? I mean, you're obviously doing you're doing performance audits of different agencies, but is it the same fundamental task and work?
It's the same standards. So we follow the example set by the Government Accountability Office in the U.S. government, which is Yellow Book standards or general auditing standards. So it's the same process, but the subject matter varies. I would say one of the biggest differences between auditing at the state and auditing at metro regional government is one, the age of the institutions. When I worked at the state, I was auditing multi-agency initiatives such as Oregon's child care system. So you're navigating very entrenched and old institutions. Metro has only been around since the 70s, so it feels very much like a growing and maturing organization. So I would say as an auditor, performance auditor, the role that I've been able to play at Metro is much more proactive and one where I can actually observe changes being made based on our audit recommendations.
I'm sorry, are you currently at Metro?
I am.
So you left Secretary of State after 2 years, and you've been at Metro for 8 years?
For 7 years. Yeah.
For 7 years. As the performance auditor? As a
I work under the Metro elected auditor, Brian Evans.
Okay. And how many of you are there who work?
There are 4 of us auditors. The structure is relatively flat, but I was hired as a senior auditor, and I've since advanced to the principal role.
Can you share with us a particular audit of an agency that you did, either at the state or at Metro, that you're particularly proud of?
Sure. I would say one of the, I'm proud of all of the audits that I've done. I think one that was really impactful was the audit of childcare in Oregon, because there were concerns about not just safety, but the affordability, which is still an issue facing working parents today. That was a really comprehensive look at our state system and the different kinds of care that are provided and the various standards that care providers are held to as far as safety, health, and early education. So I think that the value of that audit was really just informing the public about what kind of care are our youngest residents receiving and how does it match up with other states and what are some of the levers that make it more affordable. Another audit that I'm very proud of is the first audit that the state conducted of TriMet. There had never been an audit of TriMet, so that again had a great value in terms of informing people what is the structure of TriMet, how does it work with other entities in the region. The work that I did on that audit was really about transparency and community engagement. So what kind of information is TriMet taking in from passengers and others who are stakeholders in the system, and then actually acting on that to improve services.
Can you share with us a problem you found with TriMet?
Yeah, a problem I found was they didn't publish any of their audit reports online. There was really no transparency with the public in terms of what was working well or what had been evaluated in terms of service levels. So that's something that I'm proud of. There's now a whole page on their website dedicated to how the program functions.
What are the limitations of a performance audit? What might a taxpayer want to get out of a performance audit that you don't provide?
It's hard to say what I wouldn't provide, because the performance auditing is a much broader scope than
so a performance audit of TriMet could, if it were true, turn up the fact that TriMet drivers, book 20 hours of overtime a week per person, and if things were managed well, we could reduce our labor costs. Would a performance audit turn that up?
Yeah, I can tell you that the scope of the audit at TriMet looked at transparency, it looked at operations, and it looked at finances.
Okay, and what did you find that was not working well as it relates to that, other than the fact that they weren't posting their audits on
it found there was a pretty contentious relationship with the bus drivers and the leadership at TriMet. It also found I think it found that this was a very large team. It was a team of auditors that probably took up this whole room, and so we were assigned different pieces of the audit. I can speak in most depth to the work that I did on researching how well TriMet
You were not
was.
the lead auditor of that agency?
No, that was at the beginning of my audit career. I've since led audits at Metro of the Regional Affordable Housing Bond and also the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Program at Metro.
So,
And I've also conducted my own audits as a solo auditor.
you know, journalists are fairly simple-minded, and we believe that an auditor's job is to uncover wrongdoings that we can then write stories about. And that may be a
I don't know if that's simple-minded, it's just self-interested.
both. And so I guess, you know, to some degree, we're looking for an aggressive watchdog, right? We're looking for someone who's going to hold government up to the light and say, this isn't working right, and God, there may be some fraud here. So can you give us an example? Because the examples you provided so far have fallen a little bit short of sort of the journalistic ideal of what we're looking for in an audit.
Well, I think there are differences.
Because, for example, the fact that drivers and management don't get along at TriMet didn't really require a performance audit.
Well, I think there's a value in performance audits in providing an objective view of what is actually happening. And so there are cases where problems may be known and they're validated through the process of a performance audit, which is really based on an objective review.
But back to my original question, can you provide an example where you participated in an audit that turned up the kind of stuff that make journalists salivate?
I mean, that's a very basic view of the value that performance auditors can provide.
Well, I think
you
you
can take a
stipulated
much.
that.
Yeah. I mean, it's one view, but it's not an incorrect view. So I guess I'm just asking for some demonstration that you've performed that function as a performance auditor.
Yeah, so in terms of fraud, waste, or abuse, that has not been my specialty, but I can tell you that the work that I've done is really about preserving the public interest, and that means rooting out cases where there are conflicts of interest among people who are overseeing our government, and that I think is a tremendous value to the public. In the audit that I led of the Affordable Housing Bond, we issued an early communication based on work that I did that found there was not an appropriate public disclosure of conflicts of interest between those serving on the oversight committee and those making the awards of dollars. And that is a problem. I think that's a problem that I believe your newspaper covered when we issued that communication.
I think we did. Okay.
Great, thanks. Kind of an auditor shows up late for an interview.
Wires crossed. I didn't have it in my, my staff didn't. I thought it was online. My fault, my bad. But
Okay, well, tell us about yourself, please.
so I'm a certified public accountant. Been a certified public accountant for 30. Oh, sorry.
The camera doesn't know who you are.
Thank you. My name's Brian Setzler. I'm an Oregon CPA. I've been a CPA for 30 years here. I have a background in auditing, some experience in auditing. I've been a Washington State Department of Revenue auditor. I was an internal auditor for a company and had 2 stints as a Big 8 international accountant, CPA. I have private businesses. I've run a couple private businesses. I'm a business owner right now. I have served on many nonprofit boards. I currently serve on the board at KBOO Radio. I was on that board 20 years ago as well. I'm on this executive committee there. I'm a founding board member of Livelihood Northwest, a premier economic development organization here in Portland. We serve about 400 businesses annually, 78% of whom are led by people of color, 70% by women. I have a master's and an MBA in sustainable business. And
what did you said you've got a couple of businesses currently?
No, I have one. I'm a CPA.
Oh, I thought it sounded like you had some side hustle.
No, I've run a number of businesses. Ran a nicotine addiction treatment program.
You're currently a CPA in private practice?
Yes.
And what's your practice consist of? Who you
Tax and business advising.
For individuals, small businesses?
Individuals and small businesses and nonprofits.
And why are you running?
I'm running to help get Portland back on track. I was approached by some people because it looked like nobody was going to enter this race, I looked at what the city needed and really thought that bringing my skills, background, and credentials to this race would be good for the city. I still think that.
What's your background in performance auditing?
I've done, performance auditing gets this big, this mystique. Performance auditing is just auditing. It's anything but financial numbers. And I've done a number of audits over the years on GRI reports, Global Reporting Initiative, greenhouse gas inventories, things like that. I put together a GRI report for my company where you're looking at non-financial metrics, employment, environmental numbers, and different things like that. But at the end of the day,
so would you say you've done performance auditing?
Not to where I've signed off on an opinion of a performance audit, no. But I don't.
So in essence, what you're saying is you don't have experience doing performance auditing, but you're in the position that it's not that big of a deal for an accountant like you.
Yeah.
So the easiest question you'll get asked all day, you're a CPA, your opponent is not. Does that matter in this race, since performance audits aren't really financial audits?
I think, I'll answer that by saying I think the CPA is the top credential in this field. And I think CPAs, the skills that you learn as a CPA and with 30 years experience as a CPA, including auditing experience, well encompasses what needs to be done there. And I'm not coming in to design the audits, I'm coming in to help lead the office. And at the same time, I'm comfortable in understanding what needs to go on in a performance audit.
How big is the city office?
The auditor's office is
50
58
employees.
and 11 million.
50 employees, $12 million budget.
And have you managed people?
I've managed teams.
Have you had hiring and firing authority?
I've not had that authority. I've definitely participated in screening, and I've also, in my volunteer work, been responsible for overseeing the performance of an executive director.
So you both in your campaign material talk about how the city's on the wrong track or things aren't going very well. So tell us, each of you, what you would. I realize audit schedules are set in advance, but if you could come in and do one thing right away as the city's auditor, what would you do? Start with you, Brian.
Well, in terms of the biggest issue facing the city, it's homelessness, so something to do with homelessness. But just a personal thing of mine is a friend of mine works for the city, a woman who's of color, and she's talked for a long time about how people of color in the city seem to get more HR write-ups, more poor performance evaluations, and
I mean, employees of the city.
Employees of the city,
Right.
And I would just want to understand why. And I don't know if that would be my number one priority, but it'd be an important one that I'd want to look at with the opportunity came.
Same question for you, Simone.
Well, as Brian mentioned, one of the biggest issues and crises facing our city is homelessness, and if I were to start an audit today with the city auditor's resources, it would be looking at the preparedness for the city to be responding to homelessness on the service side, rather than the building investment side, which is what we've seen in the past few years.
Would that be a specific bureau you're looking at?
It would probably involve some cooperation between auditors at the Multnomah County Auditor's Office and the City of Portland, and it may even involve cooperation from the Metro Auditor.
It sounds like you're suggesting you would audit the Joint Office of Homeless Services.
That's where, that is where, yes, that is housed and that initiative is happening. I think specifically what I'd want to look at is the quality of data available. The Metro Auditor issued an audit last year of supportive housing services, really looking at the lack of framework in place for success, and we have seen continued public dialogue around that issue. The Multnomah County Auditor's also done an audit of, attempted to do an audit of housing and then ended up stopping that work because the data was not reliable enough to form conclusions. So I want to know what kind of data assets are there, what kind of safeguards in place to protect vulnerable people who are moving through the system and hopefully finding a path from the street to permanent housing.
So the current auditor has battled with city council over funding, over who should provide legal services to the auditor's office, how police oversight should be done. She has consistently really pushed back against the mayor and other city commissioners on a variety of fronts. And to preserve, she says, the independence of her office. So could you each give us an example from your professional career where you've had to speak truth to power and show the kind of independence that we're hoping for in the next auditor this time? Simone, you first.
Sure. I would say one of the toughest encounters I've had in my performance auditing profession is auditing the communications department at Metro, which has grown considerably.
Please answer this question for me. How many people currently work in the communications department at Metro?
You know, the way
It's not a quiz so much as I've been trying to figure that out for years.
Well, it's changed a lot, and it's currently, I don't think it's very clear to the public who's leading that work, but I conducted an audit of Metro's use of social media, and this was at the time when there was a lot of experimentation and advertising happening, targeting of different segments of our regional population. And I had a chance to go behind the scenes and actually get into these targeting tools and see who was receiving messages from Metro Communications. I found that there was room to definitely broaden the audiences that Metro was seeking input from for public decisions. And the communications department did not agree with my findings. And so there was quite a bit of back and forth regarding what I found using their tools and what they were claiming was the case.
Did they claim they were reaching a broader audience than they were, or that they were, what was?
It was kind of just a flat out denial, but like, I don't agree. And so we had to keep communicating clearly and showing evidence on which our conclusions were based.
But, so you were questioning whether their communication was getting into the correct ears?
Whether it was really accessible to the folks who are affected by decisions. I think that's a really critical piece of our
You weren't taking a look at whether or not they were overfunded, or they have way too many flags, or whether it's...
No, we were looking at across Metro, how are different departments using social media tools, and particularly what is the balance of tools being used and investments being made to advertise about Metro versus ask for the public's input about Metro.
Gotcha.
Example from you, Brian, of where you've had to stand up to somebody?
Well, I've had to stand up a number of times. One of the things I like about being a CPA is one of our professional requirements, ethics, is about not subordinating our opinion to others and to stand up. And from the very beginning of my career, when I was at Arthur Andersen and Coopers and Libran, there was a couple times where I came across things in audits and partners didn't really want to hear it. They were not necessarily huge things. I don't know that they would have been material to the overall audit scope, but they were in my materiality, and I had to stand up for what I found and to do that. I was also employed by a company, and we acquired another CPA firm, and I started reviewing the other CPA firm's work, and it was the worst I've ever seen from a CPA. I mean, just very, very, very substandard, and I had to stand up to what my professional ethics were, which is I needed to, when I interfaced with the clients that this other CPA had brought into our firm, needed to disclose the fact that I've found errors. And it's not my job to fix them, but I did need to disclose that. And my boss really had a lot of problems with that, and it ended up really becoming the reason we parted ways.
Do either of you have any thoughts about the job the current auditor has done?
Yeah. I think, I mean, my complaints about the current auditor would be on just a few things specifically, one would be how they handled the police oversight. I would have held on to that. I think it needs to go somewhere in the government, and I think the auditor's office would have been a place for it to be as an independent body that should operate with independence, objectivity, and integrity. So I would have probably kept it there because it needs to be somewhere.
Wait, sorry. You would have kept, can you
The police
explain that again?
the oversight board?
Yeah,
was,
the one voted in 2020, which, are you talking about IPR?
Yeah, right now the IPR.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just trying to understand what your point is.
Yeah, and where the 2020 one's going to go, I'm not up enough on, at the same time, that 2020 one's got to go somewhere. And if it's got to be housed somewhere in the city, I think the most independent place would be in the auditor's office.
Oh, okay.
And So that, and then also the way the current auditor handled campaign finance violations on Mayor Wheeler after those had been passed by the citizens. And I think she fumbled on that badly.
What should she have done?
Held him accountable, issued fines.
Okay. You have any thoughts about
Yeah.
the current auditor?
Yeah, I would say something that I think has been a loss for the public and transparency is the divisive relationship between the auditor and the other members of City Council. It's gotten to the point where the auditor no longer presents the findings of audits to City Council, which is a loss for anyone who might be interested in learning how the city is performing.
Is that her choice? Or the city's?
That is her choice.
Has she endorsed you?
No.
Okay. Is it correct that she's given your campaign money?
Yes,
And her husband?
I believe that her husband has donated to my campaign, and she transferred the contents of her PAC to me. I think that shows that she's ready for me to be the next one to take this
But
role.
that said, you're critical, you believe she's been too adversarial with the council.
Yes, I'm fine having a critical opinion. I think that's something that what I bring to the role is, regardless of my personal experience, the auditor's role is really to be an advocate for the public. And so I wouldn't let my personal experience interfere with that.
Are there limitations to the job of being the city auditor that performance auditors at other government agencies don't have? I mean, as far as you know, does the city auditor have all the tools they need and all the authority to really look out for the public's interest?
I think that's an ongoing question. The incumbent has done a great job, as you mentioned, of gaining independent legal counsel for the auditor's office, which strengthens its independence. I think it's a continued battle to have folks approving your budget be the very folks that you're auditing. So there is an ongoing tension there, and I think that's one that auditors across the country face. Luckily, Oregon has a strong tradition of having elected auditors who can stand up, as you were saying, and also serve directly the interests of voters and not those who are appointing them as appointed officials.
Brian, you had a company, Trilibrium, is that how you say it, wealth management. Why did that close in 2016? I'm just looking at your LinkedIn right now.
I merged it with another firm. I was really burnt out on running a small firm and all the demands that come with being marketing, technical, hiring, doing the work.
How many employees did Trilibrium have?
7 or 8. We were the first certified, I'm very proud of that company, we were the first certified B Corp CPA firm in the world.
You mentioned your experience at Coopers and Lybrand and Arthur Anderson. That was 30 years ago, and you were in and out of both of those companies pretty fast. Well, why was that?
At Arthur Anderson, I was there about 1.5 years. I had an opportunity to go be a controller at a startup biotech company that seemed, at the time, was getting stock options and just seemed like a opportunity that was fantastic. And at Coopers and Lybrand, they really focused a lot on their core business here. It was, first of all, having been enculturated at Arthur Anderson, going to Coopers and Lybrand was a little bit like a little bit of a fish out of water type of thing, I would say, remembering a long ways back. And then just their practice was just not really what I was interested in. They did a lot of where Arthur Anderson at the time, prior to Enron, was the leading consulting CPA firm in the world. Coopers and Lybrand was just kind of second fiddle, and in Oregon had a really weird practice that had a huge emphasis on municipal auditing.
Okay.
Can we ask each of you to ask your opponent a question?
I would love that.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm really curious, I believe others would be curious to know who approached you to run for this position.
I'd rather not disclose that. I just don't think it's really I don't think it really matters. People in the community approached me and said, nobody's running in this race. Take a look at it. Would you be interested in running? and they knew my background and who I am as a person. And I took a look at it. I talked to a number of people in and out of government. I talked to a number of people that I would be kind of like mentors or people I just trust and value, and looked into it, and I thought, yeah, I'm the right person.
Don't you think the public deserves to know who those people are?
No.
Don't you think that's kind of weird? You're running for auditor. That's a transparency function.
I don't want to get distracted in who it was. I mean, I just don't think it's that big a deal. Does it matter who asked me if I came up with it on my own or whatever? Somebody just said, approach me. I am running for this office on who I am and on my background. And the people, approached me about it, and I don't know whether it's a good idea or a bad idea to disclose it, and I just assume keep it confidential.
Do you have a question for your phone?
One that just came up right now is, I just wondered, when you mentioned taking the PAC money from the previous auditor, I'm wondering how that gels with the rules related to the small donor election fund, because I thought we couldn't take PAC money, and I just...
It's public on the openelections.org website, and I have taken one check for $250 from Mary Hole Caballero's campaign account.
How much have you raised?
According to that website, something like $20,000. I'm exceeding my opponent when it comes to the number of donations, the size of donations, and the amount of matching funds that I've received.
Is that right?
I don't know. I don't pay really I don't really pay much attention to that. My campaign right now is really, I'm kicking it in gear for the last 4 weeks. I'm a CPA, and in practice in the last month, I've also been dealing with elderly family issues that have just taken up a lot of my time, so I haven't been able to do as much fundraising. But I have over 500 donors. I got house parties coming up. I'm planning to put 4 hours a week or 4 hours a day into this campaign over the next month, and I plan to meet my fundraising goals.
Do either of you know whether any of the proposed charter reform changes at all affect the roles and responsibility of the city auditor's office? Whether that would change?
I believe there could be, in terms of timing, and this is really a technical thing. So the proposed changes that are coming through the pipeline would impact how we select leaders other than the auditor,
Right.
which would continue to be a citywide elected role. If this new set of changes becomes implemented, then I think it's possible that the auditor would have to run for another term so that it's on par with the other terms of service with the other elected officials.
How many audits does the city produce each year? Do you have any idea?
My goodness. It seems like every day I'm reading an alert about either a follow-up report or a new report, and that doesn't include the ombudsman reports. I would guess at least 10 full performance audits a year.
And how many I'm just wondering, how often is a city agency audited?
A city agency?
Yeah, city bureau, how often does it cycle around?
That's determined at the discretion of the elected auditor, and I don't know if I have that data available, but my
There's some
approach...
bureaus or agencies that have just not been performance audited in a decade?
I think I don't know about a decade, but that's one of the risks that we would look at when developing an audit schedule, is how long has it been since the last audit. Hopefully, if there's enough resources for the auditor, she can have even coverage, and the audit coverage can be commensurate with where the city is investing most of its funds.
You're asking good questions, and one thing that I want to point out is I'm coming in with an independent perspective, and I think it's important. You asked earlier, like, do you have all the tools? I don't know what all the tools are available or what we should be seeking. And one of the things I know, like when I did auditing in the past, is when you go out and do auditings, you kind of often build on what's been done in the past. You look at the previous audit, you build on it. And I'm wondering about the fact that we have not had it seems like for 35 years, first time this race has been contested in 35 years. In my quick review, I haven't gone and analyzed what everybody's background was, but it seems like it's been one municipal auditor after another, after another, after another, fulfilling these elected positions. And I'm not sure if any of them have been CPAs. In '86, the city did pass, and again, I haven't researched this fully, but I thought I saw when I went back to that election that the city passed a requirement that the auditor be a certified public accountant, and that passed 75 to 25%. I don't know why that's still not in place, if it got overturned by another vote or something legal, but I just think there's a lot of value in having a fresh perspective coming in and looking at what's going on, because whatever we're doing isn't working and we need some new approaches. And I'm not coming in to try to blow this office up. I'm coming in to try to collaborate, co-create, build on what's been done, but also to come in with a fresh set of eyes and to do things differently.
I do want to respond to that. I'm not sure what legislation you're speaking to, but it is clear from the city registry that someone to run for the role of city auditor can have either a certified internal audit designation,
Yeah, I agree.
which is what I hold, a CPA, or a certified government management credential.
I agree with that. That's the law now. I don't know where that changed along the way. In '86, I believe, or '84, there was a initiative passed at the city level to require that the credential needed for the city auditor was a CPA. That was the only one. Mm-hmm. And so maybe there's been things that added on to that, but
yeah,
I don't know.
think the office has evolved, and when Jewel Lansing was elected 40 years ago, she brought performance auditing to the city of Portland, and we've continued to build on that tradition as a region. So I don't see why someone with a narrow financial auditing background would be equipped to take on questions of policy effectiveness and efficiency.
So CPAs don't do narrow financial audits. CPAs do lots of things that can be agreed upon procedures. There's all these things that CPAs do beyond financial audits. It is the most robust credential. It is the top credential. It's the only credential with public in its name. And I'm not sure how that changed. I never thought about being additive, that there was two new degrees or two new credentials added to it. So
I just want to clarify, what in your past experience, you haven't done performance audits before, so what makes you qualified to start doing them now?
Everything a CPA does, as an independent CPA, I go into businesses and clients and nonprofits and analyze the performance of them. It's not just looking at their numbers, it's how are they doing as a business. I'm a business consultant, I sit on boards. It's looking at all different types of metrics, not just are they completing financial statements according to generally accepted accounting principles. The profession has a wide range of things that we do, including agreed upon procedures, financial reviews, financial audits, and the task of auditing is something that I'm trained at, I've done it, and it's not rocket science. If I stepped into the office today, I'd be able to lead an office of auditors and to help develop the audit schedule and what we're doing.
So are the performance audits that the Secretary of State provides pretty similar to what the city auditors do? Is it an apples to apples? And how big is the Secretary of State's audit?
I don't know if I go as far as apples to apples, but the standards that we use are the same.
Okay.
We are also reviewed on the same schedule by other audit offices to make sure that we're adhering to the procedures that we say we are.
So, and how big is the Secretary of State's audit?
I think there's 75 employees, and probably half of those are on the financial side and half are on the performance side.
And in Portland?
The staff is purely dedicated to performance audits, and the certified, the annual financial audit, the kind of auditing that Brian is talking about, is something that's been contracted for many years, and that's how a lot of local governments handle that function.
If I'm hearing correctly, the city of Portland has twice the number of performance auditors as the Secretary of State.
I don't think so.
It's 51 employees in the auditor's office. They're not all auditors.
How many of those are performance auditors? Do you have any idea?
The auditors in the auditor's office who work in Portland Audit Services are all performance auditors. Some of them have specializations in fraud and waste abuse detection.
Is that about 50?
50 employees?
Yeah.
No, so 50 employees cover
I'm just trying to compare the state agency.
I want to explain though that there's an accountability function and a transparency function to the city auditor's office, and that spans employees across 5 divisions. One of them is audit services, and all of the audit staff are performance auditors.
So I'm simply trying to compare the size of the performance audit team at Portland with that at the state. I'm just trying to get some sense of.
I think it's probably double. I mean, it's been a while since
So
I've
the
worked
city
there
of
and look at that
Portland
number.
Portland has twice the number of performers?
No,
No, the state has
Portland.
twice.
And given the size of state government
Much bigger
versus city,
teams.
does that sound about right to you?
Having more, yes, generally having more performance auditors in state government makes sense compared to city government.
I'm just wondering if you should have 3 times as many. I'm trying to figure out if the Portland City office, I'm asking you to do a performance audit in the city auditor's office, if it's bloated.
I can't do that.
I wouldn't-
As a certified government auditor, it would be inappropriate for me to audit my own function. That's part of upholding independence. I'm wondering if we could have a time check, because I was told we would be
12:15.
talking for
Yeah.
30 minutes.
I don't know what the right size is, but I do think that we should be getting a bang for our buck on performance auditing and on auditing. I mean, we should be getting a return on our investment. Private companies have internal auditors because it's, first of all, the only way you get a check on the data that's coming up through the system. And second of all, their ability to be independent and provide insights that otherwise you wouldn't get. So I think and we should probably be looking at what is the ROI on our work, where in the public sector, it's economics, equity, and the environment, and those things should all be integrated into the audit of what we're doing and what we're looking at.
Is there an endorsement organizationally that you've received that you're proud of, that you want to share with us? An endorsement that you're particularly proud of?
Sure, I will share that I've been endorsed by Next Up, which is formerly the Bus Project, Oregon Bus
What do they
Project.
call themselves now? Next
Up.
Okay.
And to me, that means that I'm being seen by emerging leaders in Oregon, that I'm prepared to be the next leader of this office.
Any organizations or institutions that do business with the city that have endorsed you?
Portland Business Alliance. They have a lobbying function. It's the same function that's endorsed me.
Right.
So
about
I think
you?
that's important.
I've been endorsed by Our Revolution, the Pacific Green Party, the Progressive Party of Oregon, and the Independent Party of Oregon, and proud of all those endorsements.
Great. I
Should we
think
do our-
we're out of time.
Yeah.
We are, okay.
Want to do our last? All right, we have
Sure.
our fun question. We're asking all the candidates. So this year we're doing, I mean, the pandemic's not necessarily over, but was there kind of a moment of joy that signaled to you that, you know, things are winding down, or that they're returning to normal in some form? Was there like an event you attended, or a birthday party, or some kind of moment like that?
It's a great question. I had some downs and joys. My roommate passed away last year during the pandemic, so it was a downer. But the joy was probably about June or July last year. I've, for a long time, done the Thursday night bike ride that rides around Portland. In fact, tonight's Thursday night, 7th year anniversary of that bike ride. And last summer, like, there was a Thursday night. It was the first nice day. The cherry trees were in bloom. We probably had about 500 bike riders ride through around the east side, and there was just so much joy and happiness. And definitely don't think about that till you brought it up. It immediately just came to mind.
Great.
This is a moment of joy from the last couple years.
Yeah.
It's the moment at which you said, oh, this thing may be...
Is it
Light is at the end.
return to,
Oh, yes, sorry, I might have
a
butchered
return
the
to
question.
normal?
I can expand on that. So, acknowledging that it's not over yet. A moment of joy for me was going to a concert on Sabi Island at Topaz Farms. And it was like it was outdoor, it was the sunset, the full moon, and there were some really amazing musical performers there that
But they have
Black Belt
pictures.
Eagle Scout and Reina Tropical and Slater Kitty made a special performance.
They're big political
that night.
donors. Have they given to your campaign?
Who is?
Topaz Farms.
No, they haven't given to my
Oh, well, you
campaign.
better hit them up.
In a small donor
Thanks for
program,
the
we're not
tip.
supposed to take money from businesses, PACs, or organizations.
You can take money from PACs.
Hmm.
If you go to openelections.org, it shows you the different state contributors, PACs, and other.
Brian, we didn't get your age because you were.
I'm 60.
660. Great. Okay.
Thank
Excellent.
you
Well,
both for
both.
coming in. Really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you.
All right.